win the lotto, or here's what the people my age started to say to me, I want to retire. The problem is, if for retirees, and I shouldn't say this because you all know retirees, your parents, your grandparents, the challenge for most, and the reason I study this subject is because I work with the police and the fire departments and the teachers, and they retire, so that means they're spending the last, I don't know, 30 years doing what? Nothing. Now, what if somebody said to you, do nothing for 30 years? You go, wow, that sounds pretty good. Well, you could, jail, I think. Jail, I don't think they do a lot. Anybody know?
They work out.
They work out? That's what I said. They do nothing.
They write letters.
I have a retired firefighter who comes to my office often, and I can tell he's just trying to fill time because there's nothing to do in the rest of your life to do it. So that term thanatos is a term that came up with by Sigmund Freud, the death wish, where it's like, you know what? Maybe you should just pass away because you got nothing to do. So don't necessarily be, one of the advantages of being busy, so there's a good stress. The good stress is being busy, accomplishing. Oh, you got kids, you got to study, you got to do this, you got to work. The problem is if you go beyond, it's being out of balance. Nothing to do is out of balance. This is the challenge for teachers. During the school year, they're working a bit too much. And then in the summer, they're not working enough. So they're always out of balance. Same with the firefighters, by the way. What do the firefighters do most of the time?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Which is, which is out of balance. And then they run into a fire, and now they're out of balance, you see? So balance is one of the tips I'm going to give you in a little bit, unless I forget. So be glad you're kind of busy. All right, but we're going to tweak things up a bit. So I got more bad news for you. When you're in a stress response, your body does certain damaging things to your body. So here's the physiology behind it. All the science people in the room, I hope I say it right. I was going to be a biologist. Actually, I have a Bachelor of Science in Human Biology. I was going to be a biologist. I wasn't going to be a teacher because, well, I didn't like kids. Well, you know what I mean. My dad was a teacher for 20 years, and I watched him ever since I was a little boy, thinking, man, he ain't having no fun. He wasn't too thrilled about kids either. I thought it was just me he didn't like. Okay, so for hundreds of thousands of years, to survive on this planet, we developed a system called fight or flight. Fight or flight was very useful for hundreds of thousands of years because survival was the key challenge for humanity for all these years. So when a saber-toothed tiger, I don't know why all the books, even in my book, saber-toothed tiger. I've gone through over 100 books on stress management. They all talk about was saber-toothed tigers a big problem back then? We have no food, the roof's leaking, and we got a problem. What you call an exterminator? We got too many saber-toothed tigers trying to eat my arm off. We also had a challenge back then with enemies. For enemies, every so often you'd be doing your thing and washing clothes or whatever, and these people come into your village to kill you. So how do you survive? The ones who survive develop this fight or flight system to respond to these emergencies. So when you perceive an emergency, or as you'll see, when things don't go the way you want for them to, your body goes into this fight or flight response. What is the fight? Ask me, in unison, say, what is the fight or flight response?
What is the fight or flight response?
Thank you.
It's still awake.
All right, so here's what happens. Your immune system is suppressed a little bit because you don't need an immune system to fight off a saber-toothed tiger. And that's why, as you'll see, people under chronic stress with a suppressed immune system are more susceptible to colds, flus, and many forms of cancer. Also in this fight or flight, your heart starts pounding, you start shallow breathing, your stomach starts dripping hydrochloric acid. And when your stomach starts dripping unnecessary hydrochloric acid, you become more susceptible to what? Ulcers. This whole ulcers, stomach, GERD, stuff that people are taking drugs for. It also drives your blood pressure up because you need a little higher blood pressure to deal with these situations. Also, and this will surprise you, because you hear a lot today about high cholesterol. And what controls the cholesterol, mostly what controls the cholesterol level in your bloodstream is your liver. People think it's the cholesterol you eat, which I suppose it is a little bit, but it's mostly whatever your liver is doing, which we'll talk about never. That's when we'll talk about it, never. No, this isn't the class for it, but it's something for you to call me, and I'll tell you all about it. I've been trying to become an expert in cardiovascular disease because there's so much of it in my family. Think how embarrassing it would be if, I doing a stress lecture and had a coronary and dropped dead. By the way, any of you know CPR? Okay, good. Little tip for you. I'm going to this bar mitzvah this weekend. You know, and this is how they got me to go. My Aunt Riva called me and said, you know, your Uncle Stanley, who just passed away, would like for you to come to this bar mitzvah, so that's why I'm going. Hope she doesn't go in. And which is fine. But the reason I brought that up is Uncle Stanley recently passed away, my favorite uncle. And then 2 years before that, his brother passed away. I'm laughing because what I'm about to say, there's nothing funny about that. Because they both said the same thing. Who? Their wives. What? They grabbed their chest, they fell to the ground, and then what did they do? They went and dialed 911. And then by the time the ambulance got there, they were gone. What might they have done? I haven't had the guts to say to either of my aunts. You know what I mean? But I guess it's because I'm in the field. Non sequiturs, ADD, ADHD. Okay, so when you're under stress, what happens is your liver produces more cholesterol because if the saber-toothed tiger bites off your fingers, you need thicker cholesterol-ridden blood to be able to blood clot. That's true, by the way. So, but the point is, if you're under stress and your blood pressure's high and your cholesterol levels are high, what are you more susceptible to? Heart attacks. What's by far the #1 cause of death in this country? I know you don't care, because you're not in the age group. But you do. You like your parents, don't you, or your grandparents? Yeah, it's heart disease. So, there's something to be learned right there. Okay, also when you're under stress, your adrenal glands secrete what? Adrenaline and cortisol, that's right. And then when you're under stress, your digestive system can go off. That's why some people under stress, fight or flight stress, they can get irritable bowel syndrome, they can get constipation. Can I say diarrhea? You know, all these problems. And it also throws the reproductive system off a bit. You know how we have that pre-murderous syndrome or whatever it's called? Part of it is aggravated by stress. Or some men, you know, some men under stress have trouble, we'll say. Okay, so the adrenaline and the cortisol start pumping through your body, preparing you to fight or flight. You're mad, you're upset, you're angry. When it kicks in with you, it could be that when you wake up or you look around and you look through your environment and it doesn't look the way you wanted it to, or it doesn't look the way it did, you kick into a bit of a fight or flight. And then when somebody cuts you off and then you look at your papers, or you know what people are fretting over, they're fight or flighting over more and more these days? Economics, finances and such. But let me give you a statement, because I've researched this quite a bit. Because you probably think that the biggest source of stress is finances or whatnot. When really the biggest source of stress is relationships. And we find that most studies indicate that problems in relationships are because of the things that the women are doing wrong.
Lucky I'm holding this camera.
No, that was a joke. Stupid joke, but a joke nevertheless.